All right. Welcome, everyone. Happy to give a couple more minutes, but let's start schmoozing. Um, it's been an interesting couple of weeks around the environment, wouldn't you all say? Anyone want to check in around that?
Yeah, interesting time to be a government scientist, especially one who worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service for years.
Yeah. Um,
Who just said that?
My name's Peter Dratch, and I'm calling from the Rockies. I live in Colorado.
Oh, hi.
And
Very small world, Peter. You might not remember me, but we work together in the Park Service. I'm in Wausau, still here in Maryland.
yeah, yeah, yep.
See, Rabbi Fred, what you've done.
a beautiful reunion. Hello, Tim. Tim is from our sister congregation, Osa Shalom in Laurel, and Peter, is a close associate at oh so many levels. So,
Bottom?
So I have the
Oh, dear.
video.
nice. Right. Well, mute, folks. A reminder, of course, to mute and unmute as you see fit. Um, And you are, of course, always welcome to be off Zoom, although it's wonderful to see each other's faces. There will be much of the time with images and texts there. So I'll be in small box and you don't need to worry about whether you're showing or not. But if you're able now, it's a beautiful thing. Anne, I'm so glad to see you. Hello.
See you too.
Yeah.
I didn't miss anything, right? Because I've been trying to get in.
Uh, There was an issue. There's always an
Okay.
issue, but
I'm delighted that I haven't missed that we haven't missed anything. Yeah, it's good to
indeed.
see you.
Yeah, you too. Um, I wonder if among the regulars there's someone who expects to be on with a stable connection the whole time, who I could make a co-host just so you can let people in when the slideshow is coming. Anyone able, willing? Martha, thank you. Thank you. All right. Much obliged. Um, Yay. Right. Ethan, blessings. Hey.
Everyone.
Um, I, I mean, I want to say that to absolutely everyone. I also want to do a temperature check because I don't know who at this moment has their job in tremendous risk as opposed to just many people that we love. Yeah. So, right. Me Yodea. Who knows? Yeah. Um, Hearts are with you all. Thanks. And for those of you who may not be regulars, if anyone is on because they of the topic or the teacher and doesn't know Ira Weiss in the blue hat with all of the wonderful books behind him, sign up for any Zoominar that he offers with absolutely necessary perspectives on Israel, Palestine, and the region. So, thank you. Right. So some of you have learned with me over the years and have probably encountered pieces of this Torah. But interestingly, I never taught this class in this form in 28 years at Adat Shalom. Um, because I was always dropping pieces of it on Shabbos morning or into Musar or into a text study of another sort. And there was always a creative tension between the school that said, go with your passion and teach that, and shut up already about this. Um, a healthy debate. So my compromise was to teach extensively around it, but never it. And when Rabbi Scott asked what I would like to teach, he actually suggested this. So I am doing this at the invitation of our new and awesome rabbi, and I am honored and delighted. Baruch atah Yah Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, the Holy One, our God, Spirit of the universe, Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, who has made us holy through the commandments, v'tzivanu, and instructed us la'asok b'divrei Torah, to immerse ourselves, to soak in divrei Torah. A devar is, of course, a word, but it's also a thing. We have the exact same word for thing is the word for word. And we learn from that in both directions, that words matter, that they are sort of equal to all other things. Even though they may seem ethereal, they are real. But also that when we are talking Torah, it's not just about the words, it's about the things. And things, right, can be people, things can be species, things can be places, ecosystems, things can be issues. So immerse ourselves in words, things, people, species, bioregions, issues of Torah. It all applies. So that's the traditional bracha with a slight twist. Before delving into what I have prepared tonight, I wonder if anyone just wants to unmute and name their own experience, not just or not so much about the particular moment in which we find ourselves, but about this larger notion of rooting Torah in the natural world and rooting our work to protect the natural world in Torah. Anyone have a burning thought or question or anecdote about that simultaneous rooting of, we'll simplify for the festival of Tu B'Shvat coming up, of trees in Torah and Torah in trees.
View, there you go. That's it. Both screens.
So,
Here.
Ralph, please.
Well, I think back to Genesis, where there's kind of two versions. One is suggests that the world is there for our taking, and the other few verses ahead, it reminds us that we are stewards of it and we have to protect the world. So the Torah seems to give us both angles.
Very nice. And another time, we can study a very close reading of Genesis 1 through 3. It bears that careful reading. There's a lot of insight there. And that also includes the tree in the center of the garden. So, yeah. Ira, please.
And the Torah is often compared to a tree. Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim, but the Torah is a tree of life.
Yeah. So the famous line as we're putting away the Torah, Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba, or Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba, and there's lots more where those came from. But that famous passage, which actually in its original context is not about Torah, it's about another feminine word. Anyone know what the actual original in the wisdom literature? I just gave a hint. The word is actually wisdom, chokhmah. is the context. And this passage in, I believe, Mishle, the book of Proverbs, is relatively late and already reflecting some overlap with early Greek philosophy, 5th, 4th century BCE, quite late as Hebrew Bible goes. And it's basically Sophia, right? We're exalting wisdom and locating it as a tree. And of course, as the Jewish people, the locus of wisdom is Torah. So it's an authentic move to to say that. So Torah is a tree. The tree is Torah. In fact, when we lift the Torah, we call those pieces of wood that we lift it by, right, the eight seam, right? The trees, not just the woods or the branches or the dead woods, right? We call them the trees. And even the Aron HaKodesh, the beautiful ark in our sanctuary, is reminds us of that motif. Torah and tree, deeply interrooted. Any other early thoughts, stories, or burning questions for that matter? Right. There'll be plenty to think about and plenty to talk about. I'm going to go through a sort of outline and a few initial thoughts with a screen share, and then I'll come back and we'll have some discussion and then rinse and repeat. I do want to say for everyone who is Adat Shalom and adjacent that the timing here is good because Sunday is this wonderful first of two sessions. There's already 100 or so folks signed up to begin to really think through what Adat Shalom as one congregation can do at a moment such as this. And I can leave that elliptical because you get to define what is a moment such as this. Environment is one of a number of core issues, replete with Jewish values, that is feeling under attack at this particular moment. There are, of course, many others. And there are all kinds of issues and all kinds of groups that are reasonably, necessarily asking for our attention and our solidarity. So I am not saying do this and don't do those, but I am reminding us of what we all know, that even if we got everything else right and got this as badly wrong as we are now heading, then all the rest of that sacred work of Tikkun Olam is for naught. So this is vital and this is necessary. And please make the connections between what we discuss and learn and share tonight with what gets shared on Sunday in that listening session that leads to the action session around Adat Shalom's collective priorities, but also let this carry into all of the decisions that we make about how we show up in the world in these very fraught times. So with that, dun, 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 dun. Let's do slideshow. Oh, I hate that bar that always shows up. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay. Everyone see a blank sky with a little bit of sunrise below? Excellent. What do you see? I can't call on you when I'm in screen share mode, so just unmute and call out. What do you see?
Sunrise.
In Hawaii.
Okay, a reasonable guess that this is sunrise in Hawaii.
I just see the ocean. The ocean is what we're seeing. And since I'm from California, I think of that place.
Okay. We are seeing ocean, perhaps, right? What? Keep
There's a
going.
land bar, maybe,
Hmm?
on the lower left. A land bar. Looks like
Uh,
a strip of land,
uh,
very
uh,
thin.
Perhaps a thin strip of land with perhaps sky and sea or some such,
Right.
right? Um, who sees nitrogen? Because most of what you're looking at is 78% nitrogen. And who sees oxygen? Right? That's the
Is this
big
They're,
runner-up at 21%.
they're
And
colorless.
yeah, right. In fact, it is colorless, and it is an accident of how sunlight manages to interact with atmosphere that makes sky and water, for that matter, blue. It is not inherent in any way to the substance. It's all about the interplay of the light and our ability to perceive in certain wavelengths. So mostly this is sky. In fact, it's all sky. At the bottom, those are clouds. This was actually taken at 37,000 feet out the airplane window on my way back from Minneapolis. And I thought, oh, this will be a fun new background, right? Because, you can get a title down there. And anyway, it ended up being a pain to work with. But I love the idea of all the symbolism of clear blue sky, right? Like we talk about blue sky thinking, right? That we need to start fresh, right? We're also looking at that which we are entirely dependent on and are messing up. And most of us, the single biggest vector, ironically, in which we are messing it up, if you look at the average environmental impact of upper middle class folks, it is our air travel more than any other single thing. And many of us are not about to give that up, at least not kicking and screaming, at least while we have beloveds who live elsewhere. So, welcome to the complexity of what we're facing. But the inescapable fact is that mixed in with 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, remind me someone who knows this stuff better. The 1%, is it boron? Is the number three? There's some
Uh,
bizarre
it's argon and no boron.
argon. Thank you. Thank you.
Carbon
Argon.
dioxide and this carbon
Um,
dioxide is
yeah,
significant.
you're right. And then everything else is a trace. The problem is that those traces matter. And when those traces take the form of carbon and hydrogen in the right combination to be methane, they devastate. And when they are carbon and oxygen in a particular form, that is, of course, carbon dioxide, it lingers for about a century. And it's invisible and it's tiny. And if you don't know, and if your friends don't know the magic number 350, then just go to 350.org for both some wonderful activist tips and for a primer on why such an arcane number is at the center of an entire movement. Because that is the 350 parts per million atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide that is widely deemed as sustainable, which is already way higher than the 280 at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. 350 is when we start getting into trouble. We are already past 420, and we are galloping upwards at 3 a year with very little sign of turnaround. Some lovely efforts were made over the last 4 years to start to stop the rate of acceleration of this incredibly unsustainable statistic. And now we're witnessing even that being rolled back. We are looking at beauty in this slide. We are looking at possibility. We are also looking at a time bomb that we ourselves are contributing to. Our ancestors had no idea when they were promulgating Torah and its early commentaries that the fate of the ecosystem as a whole would be bound up with human decisions quite as we now understand it. But they planted some incredible seeds and gave some fabulous wisdom, and it behooves us to dig. Now, what do you see?
Bay Bridge.
This is, in fact, this is from Stevensville. Once you cross the bridge, if you turn right and go a mile and a half, there's a park and you can go walk on the beach. And since I'm going out to Easton every other weekend to visit a lovely Reform temple there as an interim part-time rabbi this year, I had the honor of seeing Chesapeake Bay all frozen. Not the usual, but a reminder of the different phases of that core substance on which, of course, our life depends in at least equal measure to the atmosphere. And that, of course, is the water itself. And this is actually a color photo. You might not know, but it is a kind of a beautiful and chilling winter scene that reminds us of actually how the Chesapeake Bay should look in winter and did pretty routinely until a generation or two ago. And now this much ice is an aberration, when in fact, the recent trend is the aberration itself. In the middle of winter, we are the people who celebrate this. So we could be doing this at any time of the year, but the fact that we are having this discussion in the month of Shvat, with the New Year of the trees, Tu B'Shvat, coming up around the corner, the idea of looking at a tree that is not yet in bud, but long ago lost its leaves, and celebrating its birthday at its most barren phase is an affirmation of faith and hope. It is a promise that what looks barren now will yet, with proper conditions, grow verdant and even bear fruit. And that is certainly a hope for where we are now. Whether it's an archetypal beautiful tree like the last one or an archetypal tall tree like the redwoods, or whether it's an archetypal local tree like the cherry blossoms in Kenwood, or the tree in your backyard, or the trees that still grow even in the poorest neighborhoods in Southeast Washington or parts of Prince George's County. Blue sky thinking, lots of possibilities. So this is not an exhaustive sort of word menu that you need to know, but I named a few that are likely to come up in any such discussion. How naturally do these roll off our tongue? Torah, okay. Tanakh, trickier. Talmud, we all have different levels. Rambam. Are we clear that that's the same as Maimonides? Because it is, right? Halacha, Agada, Kabbalah. Can we put nuance on those distinctions? This is not the Judaism 101 class where we'll stop to do this, right? But thinking of some of the key words and key concepts that are going to come up, like Musar, like Makom, which is place and also a name for God, like Adama, which is earth and has the word human inside it, right? Earth is bigger than and subsumes and includes the human, Adam, Adama, and Dayenu, enough, the beginning of an environmental ethic. And those last two are there also as a little hint that there are some fabulous NGOs that are doing this work. And the two largest NGOs in the American Jewish environmental space are adama.org and dayenu.org. If you are motivated to follow up, please do. And in equal measure, how comfortable are we with the aforementioned carbon and methane and with critical acronyms like the UNFCCC, right, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that goes all the way back to Kyoto and Paris in 2015. That more recent iteration has carried forward for this past decade, and that is what our nation is now pulling out of. IPCC, 2,000 Nobel laureate international scientists who agree on the basics of the climate risk that we are heaping ever greater portions of upon ourselves. EPA, enough said. CEQ, Council on Environmental Quality. Many White Houses have one. Some don't. IRA, not individual retirement account in this context, and not IRA Weiss in the blue hat, but Inflation Reduction Act, which is the single biggest piece of legislation in the history of humankind to move potentially hundreds of billions of dollars into the column of sustainability. Far from perfect, but keep your ears open because the next fight is to save all that we can of Inflation Reduction Act. And we may, in fact, be able to. This has become a partisan football, painfully more than it should. And yet there are people in both parties who celebrate what Inflation Reduction Act funds have done in districts, red, purple, and blue alike. In a moment, we'll be exposed to Joanna Macy, who many of us are familiar with, but many are not. And in the next section, we will get to this word that you haven't, many of you, seen before, solastalgia, which is a 1980s made-up word in eco-psychology that has gained a lot of traction around the sense of sitting with loss of natural places and of the world around us, and the unique experience on our own individual psyches of being around and even being part of all of that loss. But there's also wind, and there's also solar, and there are other solutions, and there is tikva, there is hope. I put it in all capitals, but it's not really an acronym. Although I suppose if people want to stay past 9 o'clock and figure out what hope is an acronym for, we can do that because we're Jews. So this whole thing has been, do you know? And so I want to ask three last questions. Overlaying all these others, do you know the power of diverse community? Do you know the power of Earth? and more the power of metaphor, whether it's your theology or not, that there's someone who's got the whole world in their hands. And finally, the mirror. Do you know yourself enough to figure out what you can and will do? What I can and will do is plug in the computer that says battery low, because yes, it takes electricity even to do a thing like this. We are part of the problem at the very same moments as we are part of the solution. That's our reality. And I'm going to stop share just to make sure that that is now working and I'm not going to run out. Yeah, sorry. I'm in a friend's house in Philadelphia in a not oft used room where this outlet is not live, and I apologize. Oh, one more moment. Ta-da! Sorry about that, y'all. As long as we're looking at each other. Questions, thoughts, arguments so far? Amplifications.
This is Ethan. I'm kind of in a quiet, solemn mood. So I'm just waiting for and ready for inspiration, but there's no pressure on you alone to do that.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to figure out how to do this in our current situation. I guess maybe I'll put it that way. This is where we are, as much as we know, and it's not even stable now. But I think we just have to, like, right now, create a foundation for us to figure out how to keep moving forward.
Thank you. Amen. Camilla, please.
So I just wanted to, I think we all, I hope, we try to drive less and think about how much carbon we're using. But I just wanted to lift up something that I think is underappreciated, and that is, one of the damages that climate change does is it reduces biodiversity. But the other thing that does the same thing is all our lawns and what kind of plant. If we have a yard, what are we putting in that yard? Are we putting native plants? Because that can fight against climate change, and certainly, in terms of trees and plants that we have control over. Because I find that more uplifting than things that I can't do. So, like as a gardener, if I can do that, it makes me feel better. But I do believe in it that if we plant flowers that for example, there's a huge loss of insects. I don't know if people are aware, but it's almost a crisis. And part of it is if we planted plants that these the insects, butterflies and other flies can use, we might be, the pollinators, we might be having some effect, and it would be more uplifting. So I'm just.
I think you're onto something, and so does a fellow named Marty Shore. Would you unmute?
Hi, everybody. You need to get in touch with my wife, Naomi Edelson. She's running a program called Sacred Grounds at the
we know her well. We know her well.
Yeah. Well, she's in agreement with what you just said and doing something about it.
Yes. So with we were a pilot, and Interfaith Power and Light helped it scale up, and a number of us here have been involved. The Mishnah Garden is connected, and the area around it. But yes, Adat Shalom has tried to live those principles and to model them. And the power of doing something like this, similar to installing solar, the very first Jewish institution in the whole DMV to do so, is the multiplier effect of the number of people who see it and realize how doable it is, and then hopefully copy it on their lawns and on their roof, etc. So, yes, sacred grounds, and yes, planting, and yes, gardening. And I want to also connect that to Ethan's point, because while there are huge wins and losses that are baked in every 4 years and every 2 years, and certain things that simply cannot get done in a new reality, and other things that can, right? But agency means we do what we can while we can. And sometimes when we're out there on the barricades and lobbying all the time, we're actually not home to tend the garden. And there's a lot of things that we can do to bring down our carbon footprint and to decrease the negatives of modern civilization on our little plots of land and in our little, what tradition would call the Daled Amot, right? Our little 4 cubit, area of immediate influence. Yes, the whole world needs fixing. And when we are not able to fix over there, there's still work to be done here.
Yeah.
And there is hope in the blossoming in the spring. And there is agency that returns to us when we make a difference in the micro that then we leverage in the macro. And thank you, Malka. Amen. Composting is so basic. And if you're not already doing it, there's no reason not to, and we can talk later.
Can
Okay.
I just build on one thing Ethan just said also? Like, one of the reasons I signed up for this is there's so much strum and drying out there in politics and everything else. And I was just so excited about the idea of having some faith-driven inspiration to power me along, and just say, okay, I'm not doing this because it's political. I'm not doing this because it's partisan. I'm doing it because my tradition demands it. So.
Okay. And we are going to get to Torah in a moment. Just want to lift up low carbon diets. Thank you, Tim. Probably the second and third biggest thing in the average American upper middle class impact after flying is meat consumption and driving. There's a debate about what's number 3 or 4 between that and thermostat and home energy use. But those are the places where we can move the needle. And yes, as we shiver through a cold winter, because the polar vortex pops out of alignment in alignment with climate change models. That's actually new in the last 10 years. The science has explained how when there's less of a temperature gradient, less of a sharp difference between the poles, which have warmed more rapidly than anywhere else on Earth, and the other upper latitudes, then there's less clarity for the polar vortex to spin fast and tight and in place. And the kind of cold snaps that come as far south as New Orleans, right, are actually part of climate change, which, as many of us know, is often described not as global warming, but as global weirding. Because while warming is the aggregate, you don't always see that. So, sorry, that was a number of asides, but we have work to do and we have opportunity. Susan, and then we're going to go back to our texts.
I'm all for all of the wonderful things that so many of us do at Adat Shalom, from our early days of all the Priuses in the parking lot to all the other things we do, and the spiritual benefit of connecting with nature personally. But I just recall for so long how the externalities from the companies that are causing most of the damage to our atmosphere and our world, like best to push those externalities off into the open hearts of guilty, well-meaning people like ourselves. And if we don't do both, as you're well suggesting we do, we will continue to feel this burden is exclusively ours. And that's sort of the goal of many of these corporations. And we have to challenge that and make them take responsibility. So.
Thank you so much. Important to remember that carbon footprint, if not the brainchild, was amplified by the fossil fuel industry because they wanted it to be on us and not on them. And it is partly on us. It is more on them. And we need to do what we can in both realms and not lose sight of that big picture. So, Susan, thank you. Really important reminder. Right. I did promise some Torah. We're going to get there. This keeps popping up to this one, and I don't know why, and I'm sorry. So we're just going to do again. So, come on. That bar. Slideshow. Doesn't even give us the option of from where we were. All right, whatever. All right, we had gotten all of this far, and I promised you Joanna Macy. Come on. Are you seeing full screen or just part screen right now?
Just the part screen. If you click on your
There
bottom
we
bar
go.
there next to the little
Yeah,
slide
I got it.
here. Yeah.
Resume. Okay.
Yeah.
Joanna Macy is a living legend who's been an author activist since the 70s, and has given us books like these: A Wild Love for the World, World as Lover, World as Self, and perhaps the best, if you're just looking for one to pick up, Active Hope, right? Co-authored How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy. Which is a recent kind of update of many of her very influential ideas. We are not going to go too deep into her approach. It is deeply influenced by her Buddhist faith. And as many of us are well aware, there's nothing about Buddhist thought that is explicitly theological in any way that makes a faith claim outside of Judaism. Though there are some really funny things when you try to put Zen aphorisms next to Ashkenazic Jewish culture. Right, but so there's a lot of ways in which, no, you want me to be not attached, right? But there's also tremendous overlap of the wisdom. So the many Jewish environmentalists and many others have been deeply influenced. She has a wonderful typology that I find very helpful to sort of 4 phases of our journey. And we start with the roots in this stylized image on the lower right, right? And the roots of any such process have to be in gratitude, because gratitude is what comes from awareness. And when we are aware and when we are appreciative, we then develop a certain attachment. And it's hard to let go of that. But we also develop, because of that, an ethic of care. When there is loss along the way, we have to honor our pain. And she devotes an entire section of this approach to honoring that pain. And that applies to that which is already lost. That also applies to the immediacy of what we are watching us lose with each new executive order in this moment. If we don't honor the pain, if we don't stop to truly grieve, we are missing an important piece. There's a sort of collective pastoral intervention that we need. This is not just a left brain activity of how do we move the socio-political needle. It is that, but it is also the deep inner experience, including the pain. But then we need to understand both the wisdom of the ancestors and the newest approaches that are out there. We need to bring the best of all that was to that which can be with our help. And she calls this in some places seeing with new eyes. In other places, she calls it seeing with new old or old new eyes. I don't know if anyone's been in Prague in the Czech Republic, but one of the oldest standing synagogues in the world, going back to at least the 1300s, is called the Altneu Synagogue, the Old New Synagogue. And that became the name of one of Herzl's Zionist books, Altneuland. And there's now a thriving liberal Jewish hopping thing in Manhattan called the Altneu. But this idea of seeing with old new eyes, that's going to be where we focus, because Torah, in many ways, is for us new eyes, even as it is old, and new approaches to ancient wisdom can help us tremendously as we go forth. And in going forth, we cultivate hope, which is another name for that last unit there. So over time, we're going to be looking at these basic 4 concepts of gratitude. And I did put 2 Hebrew words there. Anyone recognize those, even without vowels? Anyone?
Modeh ani. Modeh is like
Right.
todah, who means thank. It's from the same root. Thanks.
Right.
I'm thankful.
And it's without vowels because it's also moda'ani in the feminine, right? Which is how female identified people are supposed to have as the very first word in the morning. The first word is not even ani, I am grateful. It is like Yoda, grateful am I, right? Moda ani, grateful am I, lifanecha, before you, holy and enduring God, that you, in your abundant mercy, gave me back my soul, that I get to live another day and have fun and make a difference. We open the day with gratitude. We open everything with gratitude. We then have to confront and honor the pain. We then look with these old, new, Altneu eyes, and we cultivate hope as we go forth. So a little bit of a roadmap for our explorations, and today we're going to focus mostly in gratitude. This slide is actually writing prompts, and if anyone wants me to send it to you before the end of the series, I happily will. But at some point, I hope that we'll be able to give a few minutes and actually in the second or third session, do a little bit of quick journaling or chevruta reflection on exactly these things to dig more deeply. What have you never articulated beyond the obvious that you are grateful for? And in honoring the pain, in grasping just how big these forces are that we're up against, name the feelings, name the experience, but also name what is it that inspires each of us to act with the moral courage, with the stick-to-itiveness that is needed to be in solidarity with the poor, in solidarity with other species, in solidarity with our own descendants, all of whom are under threat. What inspires us to act in those ways? And ultimately, we're looking to bring wisdom and compassion and truth and justice and sustainability. How? And that's a piece of this, but only a piece. If we don't do the gratitude, if we don't honor the pain, if we don't examine both the old and the new, then we will have insufficient answers to the last. This is our opportunity. We're already late for this slide, so all the wonderful images of Chamsa, etc. Oh, I think I have it. Yeah, here it's more readable. Is there someone willing to unmute who has a large screen and can read 5 vows?
Sure, I can do it.
Thank you, Tim.
I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my siblings and kin of all species, to support others in their work for the world and to ask help for when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows.
Those may not be exactly your 5, but I've never seen a better set of 5. And I invite us to think about these because while we can broadly agree with most of them, and the fact that we are doing this in Reconstructionist Jewish adjacent worlds, we start with a lot of the values that point in a lot of these directions. But really, what does it mean to live on earth more lightly and less violently? How much is asked of us? What sacrifice? What changes? Right? Where are we actually drawing strength and guidance from the living earth? Are we open to the kind of mutual support, including asking for help when we need it? And do we have spiritual practices to hold us? And the fact that many of us see each other at shul on Shabbos is a partial yes to that. But notice she inserts the word daily. Right? So much of the Jewish rhythm is weekly, but she reminds us actually exactly in alignment with traditional Judaism, Shabbos, Shmabos, right? Every day we pray. Every day we do tshuva. Every day we clarify how to do better. So this is the piece that where the Torah begins. This is part 1. This is a deep exploration in gratitude. Officially, this said that we go until 9 p.m. I understand people will peel off as you need to, and that is completely fine. But this is a sort of standalone shiur, slideshow, lesson that I have shared at Camp Havaya and elsewhere, but again, never here. Spirituality and sustainability rolled together, but as you will see, this is really about gratitude. It is appreciating the wonder of it all. And the idea is we start with this concept of wonder, right? And then we move it in a more spiritual direction by calling it awe. And out of that place of awe, which the word yirah, awe, which is both fear and amazement, right? From both sides, the fear of what happens if we do it wrong and the amazement at how remarkable all that we're trying to protect really is. We have 2 different sacred pathways to the restraint that is clearly needed against the rapaciousness of 8 billion people on a crowded, warming planet. Gratitude as the core. And the bold claim for this next half hour of Torah is that individual happiness, eco-sustainability, social justice, and yes, the meaning of life are actually all rolled into one. And if you disagree at the end of the half hour, you get your money back. All right. We're going to see a couple times the text in case anyone has to peel off these 5 Hebrew words on the upper left. Ezehu Ashir, Ben Zoma asks and then answers himself 2,000 years ago in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. Ezehu Ashir, who is rich? Is only the well-seen figures of Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos rich, and anyone who isn't measured in the, how many digits is that? The hundreds of billions, whatever, right? Like doesn't quite rank, right? How do you define rich? And the answer actually has nothing to do with net worth in material. Hasameach bechelko. Whoever is happy with what they have, that person is rich. And if we can learn to be richly satisfied with what we have, even as we have less and downsize in sustainable ways that actually increase our happiness, then we are rich indeed, but in a way that aligns with the needs of the world around us. Gratitude at some level is connected to this notion of wonder. Right? The world will never starve for want of wonders, only for want of wonder. It is a consciousness that we must seek, and Abraham Joshua Heschel famously sought it. I Asked for Wonder is actually the name of the book. There's 2 anthologies of Heschel, because he wrote a lot of good stuff. I recommend reading it all cover to cover. But there's a longer anthology called Between God and Man, and there's a shorter anthology of just bite-sized little pieces in nice big font, quick read, totally worth it. I Asked for Wonder. Maslow, right, at the intersection of the Jewish and the Western experience, appreciate again and again, freshly and naively, the basic goods of life, and do so with awe, pleasure, wonder, even ecstasy. Easy for those old familiar things to be experienced as stale, and yet freshly and naively, the basic goods of life elicit awe, pleasure, wonder, even ecstasy. The wonder of it all. I had that in my head when I was framing this. I went searching. It turns out to be a lead singer of the Billy Graham Crusades coined the song, "Oh, the wonder of it all, the wonder of it all." So we're not going to go there. And we're not necessarily going to go here. I got there once. Happens to be the Grand Tetons. But yeah, and Snake River in the front, absolutely gorgeous. This is one of those archetypal, probably heavily doctored photos that's meant to elicit awe. I want to suggest that you could take a teaspoonful of soil from your backyard, put it on a plate in your dining room, and just stare at it. And it should be every bit as beautiful and intricate as this. St. Augustine, because I like sources from lots of places. People travel to wonder at the height of mountains. Yes, there was nature-based tourism and its concomitant eco-impact all the way back in Augustine's time. People travel to wonder at the height of mountains and at the huge waves of the sea, at the long courses of rivers, the vast compass of the ocean, circular motion of the stars. Yet you are 2 trillion cells operating in remarkable concert to be able to take this information in. And yet we pass by ourselves without wondering. And the Baal Shem Tov in the 18th century. The world is full of wonders, special radiance, marvelous secrets. But all it takes is this small hand held over the eye to hide it all. The wonder is out there, but are we opening our eyes to it? So, in a multi-faith setting, this would now be the invitation for a surah or hadith or deen or Veda or Dharma or ancestral teaching. Insert your favorite here. And I'm sorry Steve Brody isn't on here because he could point out just how old this is. This is the Hubble Deep Field. This was absolutely revelatory 20 years ago, seeing the far-off corners of the known universe in a level of detail that was absolutely unprecedented. And now the James Webb Telescope has blown this image out of the water. I just haven't updated the slideshow. But the point is, there's wonder out there, and we could go the Carl Sagan direction, billions and billions of stars, and that is sacred, and that is Jewish. Right? We can also, instead of the telescope, we can do the microscope. Because how much richness is in that teaspoon of soil? How many millions of microorganisms? How many basic amino acids out of which life is possible? Lest we go too far without hitting some of the basics, I'm not going to dwell on any of these, but this is one of many potential framings for what is in the toolkit of Jewish wisdom that can actually help us in this moment. And I invite us to receive these quickly as challenge, right? Are we really living out a value of unity, of Shema, of oneness? Of, as Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, an Orthodox rabbi in Frankfurt in the 1800s, one glorious chain of love of giving and receiving unites all living things. Are we conscious of it? And are we protecting it? The humility that goes with Jewish theology, the earth is God's, Psalm 24, Ladonai ha'aretz umlo. If it's God's, it's not ours. Heschel's notion of radical amazement with wonder, this whole theme, humility and awareness, right? Etc. Well, lots of great sources. We hopefully go into them. The ecological integrity side of sustainability, where, as Bill Staines sings, all God's critters got a place in the choir, which is really the same as Kol HaNeshama Tehallel. Right? Nothing is superfluous, as medieval Shmot Rabbah tells us. Creation exists for its own sake, not for ours. Of course, the overlap with social justice, with the important work of racial equity and economic empowerment, that all God's children deserve access to creation, and we have so much in there that integrates social and environmental concern. Intergenerational justice, choosing life that we and our descendants will live. The law of not wasting, number 6, Bal Tashchit, with the idea that even wasting gas because we are not driving as smartly or minimally or best in class vehicle, unless we made a cradle to grave calculation and are keeping our old clunker because we only drive a teeny bit and we know that 1/3 of its lifetime impact is between the production and consumption and only 2/3 the use. If we are not thinking in those ways, then even a simple act like driving to shul, much less to the mall, is a violation of halacha. And then we have Shabbat, number 7, conveniently, and of course with it, Shemitah, the Sabbath and sabbatical consciousness, whether it's measured in weeks scales or decades scales. Production and consumption, that's not where it's at. It's Shabbos. And then taking a page from the Sierra Club for the final 3, their old motto was explore, enjoy, and protect. And those are also key notions in our tradition that we are supposed to get up and walk ourselves around the land, as God said to Abraham. We should explore. We absolutely should enjoy because God's self called it all very good. The interconnected whole, very good. Not humans, very good. The interconnected whole, very good. And once we've explored it and enjoyed it, then we need to protect it, which is again Genesis 2, the 2 things that we are supposed to do as humans in the ecosystem: le'ovda, to serve, work the land; ula shomra, to guard, protect it. We just can't let it get worse on our watch. Going way back to the 90s, now part of Adama, but the Teva Learning Alliance, some of us have been in touch with Teva educators. They're everywhere, and it's amazing. This has been really influential. And their pedagogy is described in this 4-part approach, starting with awareness. Simply looking, noticing, appreciating. And famous text that is core to gratitude from the Amidah, the second to last paragraph, right? We thank you for your miracles, not the rare, debatable suspensions of the natural order, right? The parting of the Red Sea in this week's Torah portion, that's not the miracle. The miracle is the sea itself. Your wonders and goodnesses with us at every moment. From awareness, we see the interconnectedness. And even the things you think are superfluous, they have their place. And now we're moving in the direction of responsibility, achrayut, as this famous text reminds us, that God leading the first human through the first ecosystem says, check it out, pretty cool, it's yours, but be mindful then that you do not spoil and destroy my world. If you spoil it, there's no one after you to repair it. And therefore, part typology leads to community. We're not going to do this alone. We're going to do it together. And I just have to note this beautiful image here. That was one of the first pieces of metalwork that the late Jeff Chiat, we're just now coming on his Shloshim, such a beautiful soul member of our synagogue. He made this, the Mishnah Garden Ginat HaMishnah, piece of rusted, intentionally metal that is still outside the social hall. And we would do well to volunteer in the Mishnah Garden. And as Camilla reminds us, in our own gardens, as locations, loci of community. This wonder, awe, restraint idea, it's got lots of parallels and lamats. Help thinks, wow. We have Mary Oliver. I love her shortest poem, simply called Telling. Instructions for living a life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. In that order. So we've been talking about paying attention. We've talked about being astonished. Now, what about the telling about it part? Where is it that we are to tell? What is it to tell? What's the verb to tell in Hebrew? Lehagid, as in Haggadah, as in Dayenu. What a great name for an eco-Jewish group, Dayenu, right? Dayenu, the liturgical antidote to human greed. Dayenu, enoughness. Rabbi Jenny Rosen, founder of Dayenu.org. It means we've had enough. It means we have enough. And we need both. That dual sense of urgency and hope, direness and possibility. This idea of enoughness, of sufficiency, not a popular notion in the consumerist West. But, and there may be some people here who are close enough to Sweden to be able to pronounce it right. But this wonderful thing I came across from Tacoma Park-based Center for a New American Dream, some 25 years ago. And I've loved it ever since because this Swedish word lagom apparently is the equivalent of Dayenu. Visiting a friend, asking about towels, and turns out she owns two. And he's like, "You only own two towels? Stop for a minute and think how many towels are in your house." Oi, gewalt. Why do I need more than two? Det are lagum, right? Which is not exactly this is enough. It's more like exactly the right amount. It's not enough because barely. It's enough because, yeah. And we and our relationship to stuff, to consumerism, would do well to have a little more legume, a little more dayenu. And it applies to everything, right? What's legume for chocolate cake? But what's legume for carbon dioxide? Legume, dayenu, can still allow for abundance, for more than enoughness, while still setting limits. If we had longer, we'd stop and ask now, yeah, great, okay, but really? Just like the song, right? I'm sure we've all interrogated the full Diana when we see it. It's really 2 pages of text, right? That if God had led us out of Egypt, but let us drown at the Red Sea because it hadn't parted it, that would be good enough? Really? How do we balance Dayenu and enoughness and patience with the fierce urgency of now? And there's no easy answer to this question, but it must be asked. So before a final conversation, just a few more key voices here. I hope you recognize the wild hair and beard on the left. That's the aforementioned Abraham Joshua Heschel, who, with Mordecai Kaplan, was perhaps the 2 leading voices of American Jewish philosophy in the mid to late 20th century. And I hope you recognize a nice girl from Silver Spring on the right. But first, the late Rabbi Ellen Bernstein, who just passed away a year ago, founder of Shomrei Adamah, Guardians of the Earth, the first ever Jewish environmental organization. And as she reminds us with a focus on education, that cooped up in the concrete box of a classroom, kids don't stand much of a chance of finding God or meaning. But outdoors, they and we might remember our Creator. So anchoring the religion, education, and eco-consciousness all together in some really important ways. Heschel coined the phrase radical amazement, to be blown away in wonder. And the Baal Shem Tov, as we saw already, reminded us that we need to make the choice to withdraw the metaphorical small hand from before our eyes, all the petty cares, snarling of the lesser appetites, as the poet Marge Piercy describes it, and open up and appreciate. We are a tradition of blessings. One way that we acknowledge our gratitude is by stopping and reciting a liturgical formula that's meant to drive home. So when you see something really amazing, unusual, We say, Baruch shekacha lo ba'olamo. Blessed is the one who has it like this in the divine world. Thank you, God, for the 17-year brood XII cicada. Right? Show me something weirder than that. But also, thank you, God, for photosynthesis. Thank you, God, for the water cycle. Thank you, God, for quarks becoming particles, becoming atoms, becoming cells, becoming organisms, becoming community. Science can explain each causal jump there, but the totality is miracle. Modi manachnu lach, grateful are we to you, al nisecha shebechol yom imanu, for your miracles, nes, miracles that are with us every day. Heschel again, who in many ways is channeling Rabbi Meir in the Talmud, in Menachot, who says that we should say 100 blessings every day. We should be so filled with an approach of gratitude that every 10 minutes of our waking life, we say a blessing. Reb Nachman teaches that when you're really distressed, you should let yourself go for 10 minutes, ramble to God, to your interlocutor, human partner, to yourself. Go 10 minutes. The world sucks. Those executive orders, my condition, right? I didn't like the dish I ordered last night, right? I stubbed my toe. Those executive orders, right? But at 10 minutes, you need to stop. Because if you stay there, you're not getting anything done. You're also violating an ethic of now say a blessing. Okay, yes, those executive orders. And what blessing are you going to say in this 10-minute interval? So I hope in the hour or so between class and bed, you have at least 6 blessings that you share. And if you have a partner anywhere nearby, some of you on screen, be the accountability buddy for gratitude. Because after all, wonder rather than doubt is the root of all knowledge. Never once did Heschel ask God for success, wisdom, power, fame. I asked for wonder, and I got it. Our goal should be to live life in radical amazement, to get up in the morning and say, Moda ani, Moda ani, grateful am I to you, looking at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. We will not perish for want of information, only for want of appreciation. That Heschel got some good stuff. So in every system, in Jewish thought, in Musar, certainly, but in life, all of this is pointing toward a certain restraint once we appreciate and once we know, and restraint has a name, anava, humility. Here's Bill McKibben, who before becoming an environmental journalist crusader was a Methodist Sunday school teacher and wrote a wonderful full-length little book on interpreting Job, chapters 38 through 42, the speech from the whirlwind. And the first meaning, says McKibben, is we are just part of the whole order of creation, simply a part. We need to know that. So what will replace the anthropocentric bias that we too often bring, that Job brings, but God decenters in those famous passages in the book of Job? Humility, first and foremost. That's sure Job's reaction. We're not bigger than everything else. We are like everything else, meant to be exuberant and wild and limited. Annie Dillard, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. It all flows so freely wild. The creator loves pizzazz. She's writing actually about Virginia, Southwest Virginia in the foothills of the Appalachians. Humility. The earth is God's and the fullness thereof. Ki li haaretz. Don't sell the land. Don't do things to the land beyond reclaim because the land is mine. Li haaretz, says God. Y'all are just strangers and sojourners with me. So you better be cool to the strangers and sojourners around you. Sorry, the text doesn't exactly say that, but the rest of Jewish ethics does. Because yes, protecting immigrants and refugees is part of this too. And this is a passage that comes from the same chapter as the Liberty Bell, the Yovel Declaration, and of course, Shemitah. And one last fun one from the Hudson River School of Art, right? Where the my personal favorites, but this one from Thomas Cole that hangs in Baltimore is just one of many. You have to kind of squint to notice the people. They're there, but they're small. That's the trademark of Hudson River art. We're there, but we're small. Can we acknowledge our smallness and our there-ness at the same time? That is humility, and we need it as individuals, and we need it as a species. Another time we'll talk about that. Leah Goldberg, 1911 to 1970, one of the great poets of early Israel, 50s, 60s. And many of us, I forget, do we have choir members on tonight? Can't do a unison, but some of you may remember the choir in past years doing an amazing rendition of this, which is in our prayer book. It's in the Reform Siddur as well. This is really modern liturgy that secular Leah Goldberg wrote. Lamdeni Elohai, teach me, O God. Barech, v'hitpalel, a blessing, a prayer. Al sod ale kamal, al noga pri vashel, on the mystery of a withered leaf, the splendor of ripened fruit. Al hacherut hazot lirot, lachush, linshom, lada'at, liachel, lehichashel, on this freedom to see, to feel, to breathe, to know, to hope, to despair. Teach my lips a blessing and a song of praise as you renew your time with morning and with night, lest today be like yesterday. Leval yeh yomai alai hargel, lest my day become routine, lest I lose gratitude. Teach me, O God, secular me, how to say a bracha. So I called this section Leah and Rachel. That was Leah. This is Rachel, as in Rachel Carson. If a child is to keep alive their inborn sense of wonder, they need the companionship of at least one adult, I hope that's some of us, who can share it, rediscovering with them the joy, excitement, and mystery of the world we live in. Posthumously published, the book she was working on when she succumbed to cancer, not far from Trader Joe's, off of Route 29, just north of the Beltway. The Sense of Wonder. Who is rich? Whoever's happy with what they've got. And that can be us. What day did God create? This day. Zeh hayom asa Adonai, says the psalmist. Let us rejoice and be grateful in it. There's a funny thing here. Our Christian friends say this every Sunday and on a good day, every day. For us, we only encounter it typically at Hallel. Ze hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismecha bo. We need Rosh Chodesh or a Chag to say it. But did God only create the days of the new moon or the annual festivals? Or is every day an invitation to awe and wonder and joy? And from the Psalm for the Sabbath day, Psalm 92, Ma gadlu ma'asecha ya, how great are your works, O God, me'od amku machshavotecha, your thoughts are way deep, ma gadlu. Right? Can we tune into the gadolness, the greatness of the divine handiwork? I hope we can. And I hope that from that place of awe and appreciation, we can then move toward restraint. But before we get to strategies of restraint, next time we've got to honor the pain. We've also got to celebrate Tu B'Shvat, and we've got to start plumbing more of the depths of what tradition has to say that we need to tune into, that will make us more spiritually grounded in our environmentalism, that will sometimes challenge our secular orthodoxies, and that will also ultimately make us more effective change agents. Because if we're going to reach to the center and even to the right of America and the world on these issues, we're going to get there through the language of faith. So, lots to look forward to. We'll be back in 2 weeks and again in 3 weeks on the 19th and the 26th. And it is 2 minutes to 9. I am willing to stay on for any discussion and questions that y'all have. Come on Sunday to shul if you possibly can and be part of the conversation that includes this and other key issues as we move forward. Blessings all. Peace out. Stay if you want to schmooze.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you,
Fred.
Rabbi Fred.
Thank you, Fred. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Just what we needed, Fred.
Good
Great.
night, everyone.
Aw, thank you, Martha. Hey, if anyone does want to argue, I'm always good for that.
Thank you so much, Fred. That was really great.
Thanks.
This was just what we needed, what I needed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And,
Thanks.
and
I
Please
hope
look
we
in the chat if you haven't seen
touched
it.
on the meaning of life. You know, I'm not sure we nailed it, but got pieces there.
Yeah.
I appreciate you recording them also, Fred, for some of us who are unavailable for one session.
We'll try to get them posted. Thanks, Peter. Blessings to you and all of your co-workers and friends. And same to you, Tim and Ethan, and everyone who toils in those fields.
Thanks. I'm not toiling there right now, but I'm
Right.
at EPA, but I'm still working on this stuff. And also just to look in the chat if you haven't seen my note there about this, the new and only Rachel Carson Museum is in the process of being created now, right near
That's a
Trader
Pittsburgh
Joe's.
one?
Oh, here.
Right near Trader Joe's.
Oh, great. They're actually building here because there is at the Rachel Carson homestead outside of Pittsburgh, which you may remember our late member Sam Book. His sister is very involved in the leadership of that effort, the Rachel Carson homestead, but that's different. And but yeah. Oh, thank you.
Spring Farm Museum. I just met the executive director a couple of days ago at a photo gallery, photo exhibit. And her name's I can't remember a thing, but there's the link right to it in there. It's due to open in 2 years. They need funding. That's the phase they're at now, and they can always use volunteers for ideas and ideas for funding.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Wow. Oh,
But
that's amazing. Springsongmuseum.org.
Mm.
All right. Oh, thank you so much. That's exciting.
one thing I hope we'll touch on in future sessions is that in fact this multi-millennial view of our relationship with nature um, was common of many of the native peoples who lived here, because they in fact lived with nature. You know, they lived with the with nature successfully for a long time before we arrived. And I think that, as happened in the last Trump administration, we'll be discovering the importance of our allies in tribes over the next few years. I was just at a bison meeting, which is called Indigenous Led, and it's really important that we be listeners to those people who lived with the natural world on this continent for millennia.
Amen. And thank you. And I'm glad that you said that in the hearing of others, so that if you miss it when it comes up, others can say, but as Peter said, because after all, Judaism is the overgrown version of an indigenous religion
Absolutely.
of the Near East, right? And we can have a hot debate about whether it's the Holy Land or Babylon slash Iraq that's really the heart of it. It's those two, right? So that in the Amidah, we have two different times that we say particular blessings in the year based on the realities of the hydro cycle. One for Babylon, the archetypal, Bethesda, the archetypal Golah, diaspora, and one for Israel, Palestine, Canaan, etc. But what about the indigenous wisdom right here on the land that wasn't ours and now at least legally is? And we would do really well to tune into that. So yes, thank you, thank you.
And Rabbi Fred, I really like the 5 vows that you offered, and I volunteered to read. I would add a 6th, I think, and unless it's implicit in those 5 and just needs to be made more explicit, which is the whole idea of vador vador. And we can't just do this. We have to teach our children this. And then I was thinking vador vador goes both ways, and we learn from our children. And I am often struck by the moral strength of teenagers and their moral compass of children and what I can learn from them. And certainly that's true in the case of eco anything. But I think it's important to just sort of add that teaching others and helping ensure that values persist from one generation to the next.
Amen. So the intergenerational piece is all over the Jewish wisdom and different presentations of it. I'm not sure if it's implicit necessarily in the exact structure from
Joanna Macy. Yeah.
Out of those 5 vows, but it's thank you and yes, and Lador Vador is key. And as we talk about, the two-way street is also in the future tense, and that's the whole notion of becoming good ancestors, right? Which is our responsibility, but that requires thinking in those multi-generational ways. Apropos of Iroquois Confederacy and other native wisdom from this very ecoregion, right? Consider the impact of the 7th generation, which comports with Torah talking in different places about the 3rd and 4th generation and the 1000th generation. So we're in it together.
Thanks, Fred.
Blessings.
Thanks, Fred, very much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the joy with us. We really needed it right now, and it's a pleasure to be with everybody.
You're here. Awesome.
See you next week.
We'll do the hope next week.
Yeah. Right. We're actually this class is off next week, but I hope we'll see you in the coming
2 weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks, 19th and 20th. Yeah.
We'll
Blessings
do the
all.
hope on Sunday.
Right. I'm actually in Easton, so I won't see you there, unfortunately, but I'm happy to plug it. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it a lot, actually. I kind of need that right now. I need a little community of, I need some direction and some people to share it with. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, happy to be one of the people you share it with, even if not on Sunday. All right.
And hi, Louis.
Right. Yeah.
What's for dinner?
I will stop recording before you